Subscribe to Film Companion for your film fix. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.
Rahul, it is a reunion after I don't even know how long.
I've lost count, honestly. It's weird, but really nice to be back on.
So it's great, Rahul, to be retaking in person, and our film for this episode celebrates its 13th anniversary, Rabne Bana Di Jodi. You were a fan to begin with?
I was a fan to begin with. I feel like this series has become me convincing you to like the films that I used to like. But I was a fan. I was fresh out of college. On a very superficial level, I really liked the film back then. But we'll talk about it as an adult, how I'm perceiving that.
How are you perceiving it?
It's a bit weird. But before that, did you like the film when it came out?
You don't know. And here's the weird thing, that I didn't remember it at all.
Okay, wow.
Like nothing. I remember nothing. So here's what's really strange about this film. I don't know why, but before the film started shooting, I think Vinod and Shah Rukh had a meeting, and I sort of came in to say hello, and somehow Shah Rukh started to narrate the story of Rabne Bana Di Jodi. And I remember listening to him and thinking two things. One, that Adi is going to be really mad if he finds out that he's telling us the story. And two, that how is this ever going to be convincing? That he puts a mustache on and the woman who's married to him doesn't recognize him. Yeah. And I remember when I saw it, I did not buy into it at all. But more than anything, the Japan's sumo wrestler scene really threw me out of it. And I just found it like, not sort of convincing at all. But then I went back to see it, and for me it was really like seeing a new film because I didn't remember anything of the movie. And I liked so many things. I mean, for one, just the opening was so startling.
It was.
And
especially
so not
for
Yash
them.
Chopra.
Yeah, exactly.
And not YRF.
Yeah.
Scenes of Amritsar.
Quiet. Yeah, absolutely.
And so unvarnished.
Yeah.
So unglamorous, and then you start to see Surinder Suri from the sneakers up. Just lovely little touches.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even when I remember when watching it, for example, I didn't have to watch it again for this because I think I watch it every year.
Really?
Yeah, just somehow I just switch it on.
So
it's
you're
like
a big fan.
I didn't even realize it, but it's just there. Like it's in my head, and I can talk about it at all times. I notice in my reviews references from Rabne just come out from nowhere most of the time. But even when I watched it, the opening you talk about was what caught my attention first. Yeah. Because obviously, growing up on Shah Rukh films, it immediately makes a statement as soon as it starts that this is not only a different film for Shah Rukh, it is also for the director. Because both of them have obviously made two previous films together before that, and I thought it immediately caught my attention, and I, as sort of someone who's just coming out of my teens, it was a big shock to me, and I think it really held my attention through, and that's what I really appreciate even now is the context in which that film came out, because it was Shah Rukh on the back of his entire Loverboy career that he had really he of course King of Romance and all, and by 2005 or 6 or 7 I think he was slowly starting to ease his audiences into a more mature version of the actor, and it came with Swades, it happened with Chak De, it happened with this film. So I thought it was a very interesting switch, and of course the mustache and the entire physical look of the film was a little like musically and exaggerated, but I just thought it was a very good idea. I didn't need to buy into it because I just bought into the concept of, for example, an introvert sort of just who's himself is a mad fan of Bollywood movies, which we see through the film, sort of using that as a medium to live his fantasy, because and that's how I connected to it on a very visceral level first, because being an introvert who grew up on Shah Rukh movies, the same guy is doing that, and that's also Shah Rukh.
Correct.
So I found that whole nice little metaness happening for a long time, and I just appreciated that Aditya Chopra, after the first few films, I keep going back to this, how all his films are a battle between tradition and modernity, like DDLJ and Mohapate, and then this came. You see him also growing old through his films.
Yeah.
You see the youngsters winning in the first two films, and here you see Surinder, who's not exactly a youngster, who's not an Amitabh Bachchan from Mohapate or a Amrish Puri from DDLJ, also finally getting his say. So this was such a different film in that context.
It was. No, it really was. And I think what I appreciated this time around was just the idea that somebody who, you know, is, as she says so many times, he's a common man.
Yeah.
He's an average man. She says, thode se boring bhi hai. So you built this whole thing, and then as it turns out, he isn't common. You know, he isn't boring. He's a man who is capable of doing so much else. And of course, the Metaness is so interesting because it's Shah Rukh playing a man who takes his wife to the theatre, who sees a hero on screen say, "Naam hai Raj, suna to hoga," or whatever that great line is. And then he calls himself Raj and becomes a version of the hero he sees on screen. So it was, all of that I thought was just lovely. And I think there's an innocence in the film.
It is.
That I didn't appreciate before. But there is a core of innocence in this whole idea of, you know, of उसके चेहरे में रब दिखता है. कुछ में रब दिखता है यारा मैं क्या करूं. And that idea of love and that okay, so you just have to emotionally believe that she cannot recognize him because he no longer has a mustache.
It's for me no different from a superhero film, right? Like you can't not tell me that Superman not wearing his glasses suddenly. So I looked at it as something in the same universe. And if you think about it, even within the universe of the film, when he decides, first of all, she's grieving the death of her father, of her fiance. So this is a compromise. This is an arranged marriage universe, which is on its own an unusual thing to deal with, especially for Yashraj films that, you know, sort of through the 90s changed our version of love. So even within the universe, you see the husband who's really a common man, and it's established with a lovely little musical interlude and the song. And you see him when he approaches her as Raj the first time in the dance studio. You don't see him approach her with this idea that I'm going to be this person she can't recognize. He actually approaches her with the idea that let me cheer her up and play the fool. He expects her to recognize him at that moment. But then if you look at it really closely, her expression when she first sees him, she doesn't get it. And that's when he decides to go along with it. So I thought that was a nice touch, and only Shah Rukh could have pulled that off. And even Anushka to an extent, because it was her first film, that was a tricky scene to do.
She was actually pretty good.
She was good, and it's very different Anushka from what we know today.
You know, I genuinely appreciated Anushka far more in this viewing. Because I remember not really, not having her sort of in my head at all until I saw Band Baja Barat. But I think that perhaps at that point when I first saw it, I didn't buy into the essential logic of the film, and which is why I probably rejected her performance as well. You know, so I couldn't appreciate that here's a first time actor holding her own against Shah Rukh and doing pretty well.
Also a risky thing to do in the sense, like your young sort of actor come into the industry. Deepika had just made, I think, around the same time a debut with Shah Rukh, but Anushka really held her own in the sense there was no baggage.
It's a tough role.
It's a tough role to do. Like you're basically a teenager who's grieving, and sure, you can misinterpret it as being expressionless, and that's something so many actors can do. But she did a little more than that. She didn't come with the baggage of turning into the Anushka she did, 10 years down the line. So it was, as with the film, I think it was a smart casting choice. It was an innocent performance in an innocent film.
Correct.
So, and that's what I think innocence is a good word to use about this film, because that's something we lack in a lot of love stories today, or lack in a lot of rom-coms today in general. Because so by now I'm a little annoyed with the Yashraj thing to keep referencing their own movies, their own sort of legacy in their movies, spoofy sort of songs and things. But in Rabne back in 2007, it was a little more fresh. Om Shanti Om did it so well. So in our head, we just wanted more of that. This was before TVF and AIBK sort of really took this to another level. So I thought them doing that with that song, with that entire sort of Shah Rukh playing all the heroes, which is a fantasy basically, really looking at Shah Rukh act like superstars of your... so I just thought it sort of flew in Rabne, because it can get dishonest at some point. It can get like, okay, we are just trying to make the audience laugh or wink at the audience. But in this, the guy was genuinely a fan. Genuinely a Bollywood fan. It reminded me of, Pratik Gandhi in Scam 92. He was a Amitabh fan, which is why he spoke a certain way.
Right.
So this sort of passed off in Rabne, and it was the last, maybe one of the last few times I really enjoyed the whole parody of our own sort of...
With all those heroines, my
with
God.
so many of those special appearances.
Oh my God, like how would you get all those women into a room now?
Yeah, they were just competing.
Everyone from Bipasha to Kajol to
That's
Rani. But as I watched that song, Rahul, I was really wondering if you could even do this 5 years from now. I mean, will an audience even get the references to Devanand? To Rajesh Khanna. And it just broke my heart. I was like, maybe you can't do this anymore.
That's a good point. You can't. And that is directly related to the sort of slow death of romance in Hindi cinema, of love stories in general. Like we've sort of ended up writing about it almost every second article that is trying to figure out a film that, mistaking sort of abuse or toxicity for romance. It's all about... It's so human now that we've sort of really forgotten that larger than life feeling. And yeah, maybe not. It may not happen. Maybe that was the last decade where we could really look back at Bollywood and sort of take very good-natured jibes at what we were. Because now the good-natured jibes aren't there. It's just like, competing with each other to sort of just look back at something. We like to disown what we used to like in the 90s and 2000s now. And this was one of the last few films I am proud to say that I liked. Yeah. But I will think twice before saying I liked a few films in the 90s today. But this film, as problematic as it may seem on the surface, no qualms about the fact that I like it. I'm not going to, really disown my love for the film.
No, and I'm a new convert.
That's good to know.
Did you notice, Rahul, how much he cried?
Yeah.
He just cries. He cries as Surinder. He cries as Raj.
Yeah.
And it's such it's so lovely that is part of who he is. He's just a man who cries. His eyes keep welling over. All those conversations with Vinay's character,
who I really like,
Bobby.
Bobby.
And that one scene in the barber shop, in Bobby's shop, where Bobby says ki macho kharab kar diya.
That.
And they talk about what macho is for a man.
Yeah. जी फिल्म में दिखाते हैं ना हीरोइन सीधी तरह नहीं मानती बंदे चुक के ले जाते हैं ओए माचो अपने धर्मपाल जी माचो अपना स्टैलियन रैमोन माचो
and this guy says no, but I'm not that guy. I will never be the guy who hits his wife. I will never. And here's a man who weeps, and I thought, wow.
Yeah, exactly. And those barber scenes, the barber shop scenes were really nice because you could see the slow transformation of this guy who's watched so many movies that he's trying to act like the heroes he used to watch. And and I don't think there's a better mainstream actor who does drunkenness better than Shah Rukh. Sure, Devdas was all about that, but I still think it's an art to do it without really hamming, without going over the top. And that entire one take shot, pre-interval or post-interval, where he just talks to a mannequin with the mustache and he's basically talking to two versions of himself. I thought that was so brilliantly done. From Aditya Chopra's side, from Shah Rukh's side, you could see Aditya Chopra coming of age with that scene, with this film, him sort of wrestling with the idea that, okay, I was this 20-something making like these really bubblegum movies in the 90s and towards the end, and I wanted me to win in those movies against the older generation. And here I'm actually taking the side of someone who I've become. So I really like that it's a personal film without anyone spelling it out. And Shah Rukh really nails those scenes. And for us to find the subtext, especially the drunk scenes, and with Vinay Pathak, you don't expect him to do a character like that. This was just like, it was so over the top that it was enjoyable.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. But tell me, there were the things that stuck out for me were still, her character. This idea, that scene in the changing room when he's in one changing room and she's in the other, and he says, "What do women want?"
Yeah.
And she says, finally, it is to be loved beyond all reason. It is to have somebody love you like that, and that's all a woman needs to be alive.
लड़की सिर्फ इतना ही चाहती है कि कोई उसे इतना प्यार करे जितना किसी ने किसी से ना किया हो।
And I was like, okay, that's a little, and I know I'm looking at it from
yeah.
a lens of 2021, but even at that point in 2008, I feel it was a little reductive, no?
It was. I had, of course, as I grew up, I started noticing the problems in certain scenes, which I was going to ask you about too. Because, for example, there's the main scene of the film. Everything depends on her looking at him at the Golden Temple and suddenly seeing Rab.
Correct.
Seeing him in a new light.
Which is not entirely convincing for me, even now.
Yes, I get it. And I was just totally thrown by the lovely, female version of the song in that
the
scene.
Music is
the
spectacular.
music is spectacular through the film, and of course that's a very smart thing to do. Distract the viewer from what's actually happening in the scene. So that scene and that scene in the beginning of the film where she just surprises him on the terrace by coming to serve his friends.
Yeah.
Right. And this is all he wanted. And so these scenes in 2021 would not fly. It wouldn't, it's sort of on social media, it would be called out, and we know that. But the thing is, I still feel like it's honest within the universe itself.
No, the
there are
terrace
people
scene
like this.
didn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
For me, actually, it was very sweet that in the end, she comes and he says कि आपने मेरे दोस्तों के सामने मेरी इज्जत रख ली, बस मुझे और नहीं चाहिए.
Yeah.
This is all I want from this relationship, and it was so moving and just so sad and sweet. There's just such a sweetness in this relationship. So that worked for me. The when she finally starts to see Rub in him, I was like, okay, this, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and to think the whole film depends on her epiphany in that scene.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite scenes of the film is the dance sequence in the end. I know it's corny as hell, but
so you're just a softie at heart.
I mean,
Hannah, you pretend to be this
I don't even pretend. I think I have weak spots. I have soft spots for a lot of films. And the best part is that I really appreciated how Shah Rukh was trying to play Surinder Sani. Really. So obviously the brief was, do not show your dimples, do not open your mouth when you smile, because that's his trademark.
Yeah.
Throughout the film, he's pursing his lips, which I found very endearing.
Yeah.
So this is the one film where I cannot recognize Shah Rukh in the Surinder Sani role throughout, because he's making it more than obvious as Raj. But this is the one film where I just feel so very spiritually connected to the fact that he's trying to play someone like me, or someone like I might become into, or someone like all of us are.
Yeah.
So I just thought that Shah Rukh put a lot of effort, whether it came from the filmmaker, but the teamwork just sort of worked, and that came through in the dance sequence in the end. The way he was dancing with such a sullen face, trying to get his steps right actually. Not really thinking about anything else, and her getting the flash, those flashes that this is my husband.
This is the husband, yeah.
Which I thought was, a very simplistic way of, pulling across the whole metaphor duality of Shah Rukh.
Yeah.
But I was sold.
You're right. No, I was also, I this time around, I bought into it. I found real sweetness in it, and I know what you're saying from today's lens. You might, there are people who would probably see it as gaslighting, where, this man has just lied to his wife and put her into a
especially when she's vulnerable,
she's vulnerable, and, put her into a situation where he's compelling her to be unfaithful in a sense, which is
testing her.
Testing to see, will she cross the line, will she choose Raj or will she choose Suri? So I get all that, but I think what helps you get past it is that the intentions, the heart was in the right place.
It was.
It really is.
They aren't trying to make a statement. They aren't like the modern films where modern films have one eye on the audience at all times.
Correct.
Here it was just the director talking to the actor, both of them trying to sort of really grow through the film and trying to figure out their own feelings towards adulthood, towards sort of going from a hero to an actor. So I just felt that was very honest. Like a lot of it, you could feel like the actors were trying to figure it out themselves, and they didn't get it right. It was flawed in a way. It was sort of uneven. But I just thought, as you said, it was a very very heartfelt effort, and you sort of buy into the fact that there are people like this in compromised situations who make the best out of them. Like there's that very good sort of outburst of Anushka, where I really realized then that she can be a good actor. When she, after the Japanese, the sumo wrestling
Which
sequence,
still is my pet peeve.
yeah,
Cannot.
for sure.
That sequence.
Talk about like really like taking it literally, you know,
Correct,
trying to give my life for her. But after that sequence, so she really loses it. Like you must have lost it at the screen. She basically.
क्या करने की जरूरत
Yeah,
थी?
what is the point? And if
Yeah.
you keep doing stuff like this, I will feel obligated towards
Yeah.
you.
Which was very nice.
Which is such a perceptive thing to say in
Yeah.
2008.
Yeah.
Especially because there are not a lot of films sort of really exploring the anatomy of this arranged marriage universe. And that is what arranged marriage is at the end of the day. There are two people, it's the reverse of what love stories we have grown up on. It's two people getting married, then trying to figure out what love is.
Yeah.
And that obligation really sort of, I was sold at that moment because you know, I mean, you grow up and you mistake love for obligation so many times. You mistake love for sort of, I'm indebted to the person, savior. And so the same thing is happening here on such a literal level. He's literally rescued her from grief, from so much. So I just thought that outburst was a really mature and sort of adult thing to do in a film that tries to be flimsy otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. And that whole, the sweetness of Taniji and Suriji was it
I mean,
lingers.
the Tani partner thing stuck on. Like
Tani partner did stick.
And the music helped. Like the music
was super.
Really nice.
Yeah,
like,
the music was really nice without kind of being sort of gimmicky. You know, that hole hole ho jayega pyar and all chance, dance pe chance and all the rest of it was just really, really lovely. So you have converted me yet again.
Well, it'll keep going on. At some point, you might have to convert me for a few films.
We will see.
Yeah.
Rahul, this was so much fun. Let's quickly think of another movie that you can convert me to and make me appreciate. You know what I love is like seeing things that I didn't and understanding where an artist was at a specific time.
Exactly.
Which is just lovely.
And movies like this really make it very obvious.
Yeah.
Like because we keep changing, the movies are the same. And
correct.
It's just one of those things. But yeah, it'll be nice to sort of get suggestions from the viewers too. And it's nice. We should continue this as much as possible in person.
Absolutely. So folks, we need you to send us your suggestions on what we should retake next. It is great to be back, to be doing this in person. Thank you for watching.